All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. You know, it's funny, we talk a lot about like the big questions on this show,
We do.
and I feel like this is one of the biggest.
Yeah.
We're going to try to tackle what is the self, and we're going to look at it through the lens of why Buddha,
Okay.
who, you know, is known for his insights on existence, sometimes was silent on this whole debate of self versus no self.
Interesting.
So we're using this great text called Observe Your Body to Understand Yourself.
I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. It's a really interesting text, and it really just dives right into that big question right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It says, who were you before you were born? Who were you when you were born? And who are you?
Okay.
And then it sort of gives us a clue. It says, understanding the impurity of the body is key.
Okay, now that's kind of a head scratcher, right? I mean, when I think about the self, the first thing I think about is my body, not its impurity.
Yeah.
So why is there that focus in this text? I know it's not the most intuitive approach, but it makes a little bit more sense when you consider how Buddha taught. So he didn't just have one way of teaching. It wasn't like a one-size-fits-all. He used these things called Dharma wheels.
Okay.
And what that meant was he would tailor his teachings based on the listener and their capacity to understand.
Ah.
So you can imagine if someone was just beginning their spiritual journey,
Right.
and you just threw at them, there is no self, or there is a self, it might not be the most skillful way to guide them, right?
You know, it's like speaking a foreign language to somebody or trying to talk quantum physics to a 5-year-old. It's just, they're just not ready for it.
Exactly.
So he's kind of meeting people where they are and giving them something they can kind of grasp onto and then work with.
Yeah, exactly.
But then how do you get clarity by not addressing the actual question, though?
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? I mean, one thing the text really emphasizes is that all of Buddha's teachings stemmed from his own observation and were intended to be clear and pure and really grounded in this idea of mindfulness. So maybe by focusing on something like the body's impermanence, which is something we can all observe directly, he was kind of laying the foundation for deeper understanding later on. Like it was a stepping stone to those more complex ideas.
Yeah. So maybe just like we were saying before, maybe this whole debate about self or no self was like a higher Dharma wheel concept.
Possibly, yeah.
Something that's for the people who've already grappled with these, you know, other ideas like impermanence and change.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Like, I know in my own life, sometimes I've tried to explain something really complicated to somebody, and I just end up making it worse.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe sometimes like a little bit of silence is better than like, you know, forcing an explanation that they're just not going to get. I don't know. The text also talks about, though, perverted thought in relation to this whole debate.
Okay.
So, like, what makes these thoughts perverted?
Well, it kind of gets to the trap that we often fall into when we talk about self.
No.
So if we cling to either extreme, right, like we insist that there's this fixed, unchanging self, or we deny any sense of self at all.
Yeah.
Both of those are misunderstandings. And you see this all the time, right? People building their entire identity around possessions or status, even relationships, all these things that are temporary.
Right.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the idea that we're just empty vessels. You know, we have no agency, there's no continuity to who we are.
Right.
Both of those kind of miss the mark.
So it's like finding this middle ground where we're recognizing the fluidity of the self
Right.
without losing that essence of who we are in each moment, right? Like that unique thing that we are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's this quote in the text that really tries to get at this interconnectedness. And it says, I am the Dharma. The Dharma is me. I am not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from me. I am emptiness. Emptiness is me. It's always, I don't know, every time I read this quote, it's so intriguing. It's like, it's paradoxical, but it's also strangely liberating. It's like those Kovens, those riddles that kind of break open the way we normally think.
It is, yeah. It's a powerful statement, isn't it? And I think it's really pointing to the interconnected nature of reality. And, you know, when we say emptiness here,
Right.
we're not talking about a void.
Yeah.
We're talking about a state of pure potential, constant change, you know, becoming.
Right.
And this ties back to the idea that the self, rather than being some fixed entity,
Yeah.
it's part of this ever-changing flow.
Okay, so how does this idea of Dharma arising from causes fit into this whole thing? Because the text emphasizes that Dharma, while arising from causes, is not bound by them.
Right. Well, think about it like this. Our actions have consequences, right? They ripple out into the world.
Of course.
But they don't define some unchanging core of self. We're always evolving. We're shaped by our experiences, but we're not imprisoned by them.
Okay.
It's like a river, it's always flowing. It takes on the shape of its course,
Right.
but the water itself is ever changing.
I like that. That's a good analogy. And then it says, the self is like the true reality, which is not in the process of arising and falling away. What is that? What is that all about?
That's interesting, right? So it's highlighting that while all these phenomena, our thoughts, our emotions, even our bodies,
Right.
they all arise and they pass away. But there's this underlying reality that's not subject to that same cycle of birth and death.
Okay.
So our sense of self is woven into that reality. It's constantly changing, yes, but it's not separate from that flow of existence.
So bringing it all back full circle, why does the text emphasize the impurity of the body when it's trying to understand the self?
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels kind of backwards.
It's not that the body is bad or something that we should reject. It's more about recognizing its impermanence,
Okay.
its constant state of flux.
Right.
And this understanding can be a powerful tool because when we get caught up in identifying with our physical form,
Right.
we limit our understanding of who we really are.
Yeah.
So shifting our focus from just external appearances to cultivating inner qualities, that aligns more with this fluid, interconnected sense of self.
Yeah. So it's not like you come to this understanding of the self and then boom, you have it and it's fixed. It's more like it's this constant exploration and realizing that everything changes and everything's interconnected.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something that's important to always come back to because, our society is always telling us to define who we are and what we are.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
So that can be confusing.
it is. And it really brings up this question. If the self is constantly changing,
Right.
what does that mean for our actions? What does it mean for our choices in this moment? How can we live with more awareness of this fluidity and this interconnectedness? These are the questions that Buddhist teachings invite us to wrestle with.
Yeah. And that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of self and impermanence, and we hope it gave you some things to think about.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.